guys, this is Nicole Van Tassel here. Sorry, my thing got really small. Okay, so today we're talking about the brain science of getting through the static. So again, my name is Nicole Van Tassel, and I'm the creator of this Facebook group. I am the creator of I Explore Academy, designed to help you embrace exploration and discovery and transition into a more constructivist approach. That is really what the NGSS is all about. So today we're going to be looking at what kind of like my favorite topic lately, which is the brain science of so much of what we need to do, which is get our students to pay attention. And more than that, get our students to find what they are learning, find this as important. So the story that I used in my original post. So my husband and I have been talking about, how things are going to be different this year. And like the holidays that we celebrate. And we were kind of talking about how, Christmas is probably going to be, we celebrate Christmas. Christmas for us is probably going to be the same, more or less, in our like little bubble of immediate family, right? But like Halloween is a very community event. And typically we would go to our cousin's house and we have a big Halloween party. And you go knocking door to door and asking people for candy. And even if, whether you celebrate Halloween or not, this is just things that my family does. So I don't see that happening this year for us. In the middle of a pandemic, I just don't think it's happening. So we had this whole, the point here though, we had this whole conversation. I was talking about it. I'm like, yeah, Halloween's going to be different. I feel like Christmas, yada, yada. Okay, so a few days later, out of the blue, he goes, you know what, Halloween's going to be so different this year. I'm like, did you miss the entire conversation? Like, we talked back and forth. And then in hindsight, I realized, okay, I did most of the talking. He was there. He kind of like probably nodded and did his or whatever. Clearly, I was talking and he was not listening. So this happens in our classroom all the time. We're just like, wah, 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 Charlie Brown. And our students are not actually tuning into what we are saying, and they're not actually really learning anything because their brains have not decided that we were worth listening to. So how do we actually get them to pay attention? And that's what we're going to kind of be talking about here. So there's really a few components. And before we get to that, I want to just talk about your brain's basic goals. So we're talking about the brain science. It's really fascinating, and understanding the brain science is really going to help you understand, again, how to use how our brains work to our advantage as teachers. So our brain has a couple of basic goals. First of all, it's always working to help us avoid threats. These can be physical threats, emotional threats, social threats. If you did How to Anchor, this probably looks familiar because so much of the How to Anchor little boot camp challenge that I did a few months ago, I'm actually going to be doing that again next month, so stay tuned if you missed it. A lot of it we talked about some of this brain science. So this looks familiar. It's not all from the How to Anchor, but this is going to look familiar. And I've been talking about it a lot. If you've seen any of the other videos, or you've tuned into any of the academy workshops or whatever, we've been talking about our brain science. Oops, sorry, you're not seeing the right slide. Why are you not seeing the right slide? I hate it when it does this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so our brain goals, again, if you did How to Anchor, you probably have seen this slide, but we have basically 3 brain goals, and that is to avoid threats, be happy, that's pretty self-explanatory, and survive better. So to improve, grow, and thrive. So our brain is always growing, and there's certain periods in our life where it grows certain things better than other periods, but our brain always has the capacity to grow and to improve and to survive better, because that's what we're programmed to do. So understanding the brain goals is one part of what we need to know to get our students' attention. And the reason for that is because that first brain goal, avoiding threats, is the one that can really stand in the way between your students learning your content and your students just sitting through class and doing nothing. This is a quote, again, you've seen it a lot of times if you've done anything with me. But no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. I always thought that relationships and management, I thought relationships were about management. I thought it was about keeping our students behaved so that they could learn. In reality, relationships allow the brain to focus on the next level of learning, like the higher level of thinking that they need to do to learn. So our brain's goal is to avoid threats, and it has a few things like the lizard brain things that are always constantly looking to avoid threats. You have your brainstem, your cerebellum, and that is just like react, and it's just constantly, we're looking, oh, I spelled that right. Typo, brainstem. I guess I threw art in there. Anyway, so react. Then you have your reticular activating system, and that is scanning for things that are relevant and important. And then you have your limbic brain, which is like all of your feelings, and the amygdala and all of that. So these are all the things that are just happening under the surface. They are not necessarily, this is not what is helping your students learn, but these parts of your brain can stand in the way of your student learning if you accidentally trigger the wrong thing. So lizard brain is always on, it only reacts. The important things that we want to focus on are the reticular activating system, and we're going to get to that in a minute, and the amygdala, which right now, reticular activating system, like I said, only the important stuff's just scanning. But the limbic brain, the amygdala, is what we're going to be focusing on with relationships. So we all know in our NGSS classrooms that students have to take risks. In any learning situation, students run the risk of looking like they don't know something, feeling like they don't know, or like they are dumb, or like there is something wrong because it takes them a longer time to get it, to struggle. Learning is a very risky task or a very risky endeavor. And it's not risky, it shouldn't be, but the way that our society is, or the way that we have, the way everything is in our world, we think that if you struggle, it means you're not good. And if it takes you a long time to get it, there must be something wrong with you. And if you make a mistake, we laugh at them. And in reality, that's all part of learning. Nobody laughs at the baby who falls down 12 times because it's learning to walk. It's just learning to walk. That's part of the process. And that's the part of the process for all the things that we learn. Unfortunately, our society doesn't necessarily value that learning part of the process. And we think that, we laugh at failures, we put them down, and our students carry that attitude into our classroom. So learning is a risky behavior. It shouldn't be, but it is. So what that means, and especially NGSS style learning, is a very risky type of task, because we are saying, I'm not going to tell you the information. You have to struggle to figure it out. I'm not going to give you the questions. I want you to ask them. And again, asking questions means I don't know something. It means I might not be smart enough. It means I might have a stupid question. And these are words that our students use, and these are words that we have probably used, and we've probably laughed about. And I'm not judging you. I've said dumb things like that too. But those attitudes are all conveyed to our students. And again, learning can be really risky. So our students come into our classrooms, and immediately, especially in an NGSS style classroom where they're struggling, where they're figuring it out, they're struggling, they're throwing out ideas, they're looking dumb, they're unfamiliar with this style of learning. It's new, it's different, it's uncomfortable. They don't really know the landscape. It is very risky. And that triggers the amygdala, that triggers the brain's guard dog, kind of that fear system, because it's a threat, because all of those unknowns are a threat. And obviously, for some students, depending on their previous life experiences and all of that, it can trigger it more or less than others. When the amygdala is triggered, it bypasses all other parts of the brain, and it releases cortisol, and it releases that fight or flight response. At that point, as soon as that stress hormone is sent out, no other cognitive processes can happen. You literally cannot think clearly. You cannot have reasoning and logic and all of those things when your body is flooded with cortisol and you are in this fight or flight response. So what that means is if your students are feeling threatened in any way, and obviously not necessarily because of you, but if they're feeling that stress, if they're feeling that, if they're pushed into that fight or flight response because they don't know the question, they panic, or they answer and they panic, or it's starting to get really hard and they are worried about looking dumb or something like that, it stops all learning. And it stops it for about 20 minutes, but cortisol can even stay in the body for up to like 3 hours. So theoretically, learning is impacted for several hours after that incident. So what do? Like, the lizard brain, this lizard brain here is literally the gatekeeper to learning, because you have to get it under control if you want to get to that next level, which is where all the higher cognitive processes happen, the neocortex region. This is where you're thinking, your working memory, like I need to remember these 5 things so I can go make sense of them. The planning, the abstract thinking, organization, self-regulation, all of that happens in that neocortex region. The more cognitive, like this is what students need to get to use to learn. Can't use any of those processes when it is dealing with all that lizard brain stuff. Okay, so how do you get past the lizard brain? So how do we get past the amygdala? That is where your relationships come in, and that's why we started with relationships. No matter whether you are in the classroom or whether you are virtual learning this year, relationships are going to be the number one thing you have to get like a grip on in your class. You have to establish those relationships. Because when we are social creatures, we are social learners, we are social. We've all probably realized that with this whole situation and this like desire to be connected to each other and not always being able to connect to each other. We are social, and when we are with other people, our brain releases lots of nice hormones and lots of nice chemicals that tell us to like chill out and relax, and you can use all those more evolved parts of your brain to think logically and reason and organize and remember things. But when you're in that like fight or flight stress response, you can't do any of that. So you need to have relationships to literally tell your amygdala to like cool out, like chill out, cool down. It's okay. Everything's good. You can take those risks and we're okay. We're safe here and there's nothing to be afraid of. Because again, the risky behaviors are where all of the learning is going to happen, like throwing out your ideas and talking about those ideas and disagreeing with ideas. All of that. You need to have relationships to really get a grip on that amygdala and tell it to relax. The second part, so relationships are going to be like your number one thing this school year as you go back. Now, the second part is your reticular activating system. And this is the relevance factor. So the 2 things that our brain are triggered to look for are relationships and relevance. And you have to have those 2 things if you want to get any type of, learning to happen. So the reticular activating system is where your relevance comes in, like the relevance factor comes in. And that is where, so you have your relationships, now we have to have the relevance. The reticular activating system is constantly scanning for 3 things. So I really like this quote because it makes, so often we hear like, oh, my students last year were way better, or my group on A day is so much more focused than my group on B day, or whatever. Like, our job is to teach the students we have, not the ones we'd like to have, not the ones we used to have, like the ones we have right now. So you have to remember that whatever worked, beyond accepting that and accepting your students for who they are, you also just have to realize that like what worked for you in the past might not work with this group of students. What the phenomenon that really engaged yesterday's class might not connect with this group as much. The phenomenon that engaged your students 3 years ago might not connect with the group you have now. We really have to be responsive to our students, and we have to really know them. Again, ties back to relationships, but figure out what is going to be relevant to them, because that reticular activating system. So it's scanning for 3 things. It's scanning for novelty, like that ooh, ah kind of thing. It's scanning for relevance, and it's scanning for emotion. So novelty is, I know this is the one we always rely on in science classes when we think of like doing those big flashbang demos and stuff, like the elephant toothpaste and let's make things explode. Let's get this new gadget and let's make sparks fly and whatever. The thing with novelty is it wears off so fast. You cannot rely on novelty to keep your students engaged because it will not last longer than 1 class, maybe 2 classes, I don't know. For sure, not an entire unit storyline. So when we're talking about phenomena and we're talking about making our lessons engaging, you have to go beyond novelty. And that's where relevance and emotion like comes in. So we need to make our reticular activating systems, or particularly our students' reticular activating systems, think that the information that you are going to give them is relevant to them, or you need to connect it to their emotions so that, and this is taking that to that deeper level, and that's, again, what we talked about in how to anchor a lot, taking it to that deeper level and connecting to them on like a personal human level. So relevance, I mean, that's where you're choosing your phenomena to be relevant to them. And it might be an interest-based relevance, like choosing, you have a group of students who are really interested in, I don't know, skateboards or something like that. So you're choosing that as a phenomena. And a lot of times, whatever you've planned for your unit storyline, you can do like simple tweaks. Instead of choosing a car crash as your phenomena, you can choose a skateboard crash. And now it's a little bit more relevant. Instead of choosing like this ecosystem, like this particular interaction in an ecosystem for the phenomena, you choose one that they are more likely to see out in their, neighborhood. Or you choose one that just would be more interesting to them based on, again, their interests. So it can be relevance-based, like their experiences. It could be based on their interests, but you're tying into something about them that they can connect with it. Emotion is where you're bringing in that human factor. So this is important because it pulls on the heartstrings, it tugs on the heartstrings. It is, that's, social justice issues are a place where you can bring in that emotion, because you can get, connect with like the empathy of it, and you can also connect with the like injustice or the frustration. I don't want to say like anger, but that like indignation, like that's not fair kind of thing. I mean, all of those things they get people interested and fired up and wanting to talk about it and wanting to investigate and all of that. So the reticular activating system, you have to get that thing to tune in, or it's not, or your students are not going to hear what you say, and they're not going to be engaged in your lessons. Novelty wears off fast. We got to let go of novelty in our science classes. You have to tie to relevance. You have to tie to emotion. You have to think beyond like the big flashbang in your science class to like, why does this matter? And that bringing that why into your science class. Now the it didn't switch. There we go. Okay, so again, really how you're going to get through the stats, because this year, if anything, there is so much going on, whether you're in class or whether you're at home. There's a pandemic, there's going to be an election this fall, there's all of the home stuff happening that as a result of the last 6 months. I don't know what's going on in your students' homes. Hopefully you figure it out when you get into your classes. But the way you're going to really get your students to tune into you and to connect with you this fall is starting with those strong student relationships and starting with like that engaging and relevant phenomena. If you can bring in those relationships, and then you can tie whatever content you decide to teach this fall or whatever content's been assigned to you to something relevant to them and to an engaging phenomena, you will get them to tune in. You'll get them to show up to your online lessons. You'll get them to remember what they did 3 days before. If you don't do those two things, it's going to be a mess. Like this, of all years, is when we have to bring in the big guns in, bringing engagement in, and that's, it comes down to those relationships, and it comes down to that like relevant phenomena and relevance. And I know like everything is a mess this year, and it's going to be different. It's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel like what learning is like, right? It just feels scary, uncomfortable, different. Depending on your circumstances, it might like literally be like terrifying. Depending on, your health or your student, whatever. And I don't want to diminish that. So this is not going to be an easy year, and I don't want to say like this just solves all of the problems. But those are two things that you do have control over. You have the ability to establish those relationships. You have the ability to choose phenomena that will make your content relevant. And the little bit that you can do, like to connect with those students this year, I mean, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Mosquitoes, I have gotten eaten up on some of our camping trips this year, and I definitely feel that mosquito days and days afterwards. So you want to be the mosquito. You want to have your students, I don't know how to word that without it being weird. But you want to make that small difference in your students' lives this year with all the mess that's going on. Getting those two things, at least you can have them engaged in your science classes. At least they can be connected to you. And if you don't get to all the content, if you don't get to all of the little bits and pieces, at least, you made that small bit of difference this year. One last thing to keep in mind, like, your best practices are still your best practices. Again, getting through all the content, you have to do what your admin says, so, listen to them. But, if you can still do exploration and cover some of that content and still have them liking science and still have them connected to you, then, hey, I would say that's a win for this year, because it's going to be different and everybody is affected with this. And we just have to do our best. But just remember, your best practices are still your best practices. Don't forgo those best practices to get through it all. And your best practices with building relationships are still your best practices. Your best practices with choosing relevant topics are still the best practices. Whether you're online or you're in the classroom, it looks different, but they're still the same best practices. It just, maybe how it's carried out is a little bit different. Overall, if you're feeling lost or confused or overwhelmed, you're always invited to join us in iExplore Academy. That's our program, basically to work with us, with me, and get a grip on the 3D learning, get a grip on putting exploration to work. Beyond our core program, which literally walks you through designing your storylines and walks you through designing your lessons and incorporating that exploration and discovery, we have a full course. We're wrapping it up with assessments on Thursday. We have like a full little mini course on NGSS distance learning that we've done throughout this summer that you can go and access and watch all the replays to. You also get support in our twice 2 to 3 times a month meetings, so 2 meetings at least. Sometimes we throw in an extra one, as well as like the bonus resources and workshops and all of that. So you're not alone. You have people here, whether it's in this free Facebook group, whether it is in the academy, me, just reach out. And as always, if your school or district is looking for support, for programs, for trainings, anything like that, I would love to work with you and with them this fall, this spring, whatever it is, and help you continue providing really high quality 3-dimensional learning to your students. So I hope this was a good little good review of the brain science behind really getting your students to tune in. It's all about those relationships and their relevance. All right, I will catch you guys later. Have a wonderful Monday.